Good afternoon, friends, and thank you very much for being present here for this media interaction. Since this was the first time that the high representatives for security of the BRICS nations are meeting here in New Delhi, we had requested the National Security Advisor to brief you about the concept as well as the discussions that he had today with his counterparts. So without much, also we have along with him here today, we have the Deputy National Security Advisor, Ms. Vijayalatha Reddy, and also on further to NSA's left, Secretary ER, Mr. Pinak Chakravarti. So what we will do is I'll request the National Security Advisor to make a few brief opening comments, and then the floor is open for questions. I'll request NSA to make his remarks now. Thank you.
Thank you, Akbar. We've just concluded the meeting of the National Security Advisors, or High Representatives responsible for national security, as we're also called, of BRICS countries. We were honored to host this meeting, and I must thank all my colleagues in the BRICS for having made this a very successful meeting. The BRICS NSAs have actually been meeting since 2009. We first met as a group to prepare the Ekaterinburg Summit of BRICS leaders, which was the first summit of BRICS leaders. But this is the first time that we're doing a standalone meeting of the NSAs. We've met after that as well, by the way. We met on the sidelines of Sanya. We met on the sidelines of other summits in Brazil as well. But this is the first standalone meeting as such, and we did this because in the Delhi summit in March, we were asked to meet and to look at issues of common concern and to look at the international situation. Over time, as you know, the BRICS itself as a platform has grown both in significance and in the nature of the dialogue and the work that we do together. Started off primarily looking at economic issues, at economic cooperation. Over time, those consultations and the work that we do has grown considerably. And it's natural, given the kind of similar interests that we have as emerging economies, that national security issues should also come onto the agenda and become an important element. So what we really used the meeting for was to consult, to coordinate, and to see where we can cooperate on some of these issues. We discussed how the BRICS, which today account for 43% of the world's population, a little around 1/4 of the world's GDP, of how we can work together for global peace, for stability, for development, and how BRICS could be a factor of stability and growth. I think it's clear that when you look at the world economy and the condition it's in, much of the growth in the economy is actually coming from emerging economies, from what are called developing countries. Today, most of our discussions actually concentrated on the important regional and global developments. Naturally, West Asia and North Africa was a very large part of what we discussed. Syria, Libya, Mali. We also discussed ways to enhance our cooperation and coordination in issues like cybersecurity, terrorism, piracy, and other such threats to international security. We looked at ways to increase coordination and cooperation among us as BRICS on these issues. We each have strong and healthy relationships with each of the other BRICS countries. Those are bilateral, but what we looked at today was how we as BRICS, as a collective, could do something about these issues. Discussions throughout were constructive, positive, forward-looking, and there was a high level of congruence in our discussion of these issues. So we found it very useful. In fact, useful enough that at the end everyone said we must do this again. So that gives you an idea of how successful the participants thought it was. In one sense, what we were doing will feed into the preparations for the Durban summit at the end of March, which will be the summit of BRICS leaders, and which will be the fifth summit in the first cycle of leaders summits, starting in Ekaterinburg. This will be, we've done each of the other countries. And so we also had some discussion of what we expect from the Durban summit. Of the South African side briefed us about their preparations for it, which are well on track and going very well. And much of what we discussed, we will report back to our own leaders, and then we hope it feeds into what they do at Durban. I'll stop there and maybe leave it open to questions.
Since the NSA has spoken about a vast canvas, we will focus on those issues that he has spoken on first, and then we will have questions if there is time left for other issues. Maybe we start with...
Other issues?
If we have time. Parul?
So you spoke about issues of national security which came up during the BRICS summit. Could you give us some details on what kind of national security issues came up, but particularly with reference to India?
I told you, terrorism, piracy, cyber security, I mean, these are all national security issues, and some of the threats that come out of the situation, the turmoil in West Asia and in North Africa.
Just hold on. Ranjit?
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Why not?
I don't expect BRICS to do something about it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, Vijay Naik.
Sir, is there any kind of joint mechanism that is likely to be set up among the BRIC countries to deal with the national security issues, number one? Because we have many working groups with other countries. Is there any kind of a joint effort or joint mechanism that you are thinking to deal with the security issues?
The way BRICS has worked so far is, I mean, we've had occasional meetings of national security advisors. When we have a particular issue that we want to develop, that we think that many of us or all of us feel that we need to work on, we set up ad hoc working groups, expert groups, and so on. That's how, for instance, we developed the idea of a BRICS bank for infrastructure development, which now seems almost ripe, which will be coming to the Durban. And today, when we discuss these issues, which I mentioned to you, in many of them, the BRICS, the other NSAs felt that, yes, these are worth carrying forward and in expert-level discussions. So what we will try and do now is we will actually see where we can set up groups, which issues there's enough traction in. It's a continuous process. It's not meeting to meeting. We have Sherpas. In fact, that's why Secretary here is our BRICS Sherpa. We have Sous Sherpas who stay in touch with each other. And they will make sure that this process continues. So when you say, is there a permanent mechanism? I'm not quite sure how to answer it. As we have a job to do, we will have a mechanism. And we agreed that we'll meet again as well. But we didn't say we will meet every month on the second Tuesday or fix a date time, nothing like that, no. So.
Yeah, Ranjit?
Security situation in Syria is deteriorating rapidly. So have you specifically discussed this issue and evolved a common position on Syria?
We had a fairly detailed discussion on it. And well, I hope I reflect the sense of the discussion correctly when I say that it was quite clear that all of us felt that it's for the Syrian people to choose their future. One, the international community can only be a facilitator. Secondly, that we thought that the deterioration in the situation and the increasing violence was something of great concern to all of us. Also, the rise in extremist and terrorist forces in the region and in Syria itself, which seems to be increasing over time. Our own feeling was that what is needed is that a political process which actually tries to include all Syrians in it is what is required. That there are no military solutions to this kind of problem. But there was a detailed discussion on it, yes.
Sir, good afternoon. You know, last year's question of cybersecurity sounds very important. How you and your colleagues see the cooperation of BRICS countries in this question? And did you discuss any mechanism in this cooperation? Thank you.
Yeah, I think many of us felt that, in fact, there were many ideas on cybersecurity because each of our countries is in the process of putting in place their own systems for cybersecurity. Whether it is India, it's China, each of us is in the process of putting in place regulations, structures, organizations to deal with this. So there was a fairly detailed discussion of that. We all had different and many ideas actually on how the BRICS could cooperate to do this, whether it's exchanging best practices, whether it's putting our emergency response teams in touch with each other, whether it's dealing with cybercrime. So we went through it in some detail, and there was many good ideas on the table, which now we will carry forward as we continue to discuss it, as I said, in this Susherpa process. But it's obviously an issue which bothers all of us. It's the more networked we get, and the more of our citizens who use and depend upon the internet and social media, the more concern there is about that it be safe, secure, and healthy.
Naz?
We're meeting tomorrow. Most of us are doing bilateral discussions on the sidelines. Some have taken place, some will happen tomorrow. I'll go and do some just after this. We'll discuss our whole relationship. All that, let us meet first, then I'll tell you.
One question only, please. Archis?
So what do you make of Pakistan's suggestion that UN MOGIP should investigate the January 8 incident on the LOC? Are we willing?
MOGIP still exists? I thought they don't have a role.
Do you think our CBMs across LOCs are unraveling and new rules of engagement are called for? Do you think Pakistan is trying to make?
You want to
LOC
make a
again?
statement, come and sit here and make it.
Yeah.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Dr. Suman?
Thank you for doing that.
About BRICS, but whether something conclusive coming out of the BRICS, this meeting, that we can tell to the people that this has come out of this meeting?
As I said, if you look at the nature of the BRICS process, it started off as an idea of, originally as BRIC, as for emerging economies, and as an economic concept. The first few meetings were at lower levels where we discussed how we could cooperate in economic fields. That bore some fruit. As that bore fruit, it was raised to the level of the foreign ministers. Finally, the leaders met in 2009. I mean, that process itself took 5 years. And by that time, the agenda had grown to cover not just bilateral economic or multilateral economic cooperation, but also the global economic situation, issues of global governance, issues of political significance, When you came to the Sanya meeting of the leaders, for instance, there was a large section expressing views on political developments in the international situation. The first reference to what was happening in West Asia was in Sanya in 2010, and so on. So slowly the ambit of what BRICS has worked on has grown. And I think it has resulted in some concrete cooperation measures. There are networks, of course, of think tanks, there are exchanges at various levels between various BRICS countries. But I think the most concrete suggestion that now is on the table is the one for a development bank, or a BRICS bank for infrastructure, which, if you ask us on the national security side, it's been a growing field of cooperation. As I said, we already have strong bilateral cooperation in this field with, whether it's India, Russia, India, China, India, Brazil, India, South Africa. The question is what we as a group can do on issues like cyber, for instance, is an issue which no individual country or no two countries can actually deal with just on their own. So there is a long list of things that we think we should be looking at as BRICS. But if you tell me, today, what have you done? I'll say what we have done is take another step forward on this rather long road, which we will keep working on. And everybody who was there in the room at the end thought it had been very useful and very positive.
Rajiv?
Mr. Menon, I understand and appreciate your statement that you don't expect BRICS to do anything on this LOC incident. But during this standalone meeting and during your bilaterals, did any of the BRICS NSAs broach up the topic with you? And did you happen to brief them, and what is your own assessment of the situation?
Simple answer, no.
Sharath, would you like to? No. Yeah, Nidhi?
There.
To you here. We saw the Foreign Office's statement yesterday on the LOC incident, but my question is whether there is any in the government about whether to revisit parts of the dialogue process with Pakistan, peace process, perhaps hold the peace agreement back for some time. This is some of the speculation that's going around. So is there any...
All this is speculation. You've heard what the foreign minister said. He's made it quite clear that he's not jumping to any conclusions at this moment. So I suggest you wait and let after all, he's been speaking to you even today. So I think you need to at least give him more than 15 minutes before you ask, have you reevaluated again? Have you changed policy again? No, I think it's quite clear. Government has said what it has to say on the event. It was, you have a selection of adjectives, reprehensible, barbaric, dastardly, whatever you want. Sadly, it's not the first time this has happened. I hope it never happens again. But we've also told you exactly what we intend to do. So now I think you should let government go about its business. But you won't hear anything different from me from what he told you.
Last question, Smita.
Could you give us a sense of the number of increase, the ceasefire violations that have been reported, especially over the last 1 year, and given the timing, that even during peak winter timing, is there a sense that perhaps there are infiltration attempts happening with a possible backup cover of the Pakistan army, or are there sections within the Pak army that are not on the same page as far as the dialogue process is
concerned? Look, I don't speak for the Pak army. I can't tell you what's in their mind. I can tell you what happens. There has been an increase in ceasefire violations. There has been an increase in infiltration attempts, not only in the last few months. In 2012, there was an increase overall, over 2011. And that's a fact. And that's something we're dealing with, both ourselves and with the Pakistani authorities.
Thank you very much. With that, we come to the end of this event. Thank you.